Hi there, my name is Kelly Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life.
Hello, everybody. It's Kelly.
And it's Max.
And we are back this week, as promised, to talk about heroes.
Yes.
And why it's bad to be bland. And Max, to your point, when you talked last week about villains and heroes, it was how they responded to
pain and trauma.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then you get into the category of a thing called the anti-hero, and there's some real gray area, and a lot of when you start talking about that, there gets into a lot of discussion and debate. Because the thing about it is, for someone to be a hero, not absolutely, this is not in absolutely every case, but one man's hero is another man's villain, or it's been said one person's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. In order to be heroic, in order to further the cause of something, at the same time, you have to be against whatever the opposite is. Not just, I want to be a good guy, I want to be this kind of person, but you need an equal amount, and sometimes even more so, of I don't want to be like that. The thing about heroes, and I could talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, and but particularly Deadpool, because you have a lot of very flawed people in there, Deadpool in particular, of just having any amount of problems, and he's does cocaine, and he's a womanizer, and all of this stuff, but somehow he finds himself in a position where it's kind of like, this is how you have to behave. You've got to be the hero. And so many heroes, it's not like they make the conscious choice. They just find themselves. And that heroes are not perfect. Heroes are human beings. And I'll give you one of from my childhood, my two favorites were Batman and Sherlock Holmes. And I've talked about Batman. This is, young Bruce Wayne sees his parents get murdered in front of him, and it obviously leaves a huge, Grand Canyon-sized scar in the middle of the guy's psyche and his soul. And that is what has prompted him for the rest of his life to go about fighting crime and do it in the way that he does, and that Batman will not kill anyone. That is against his code of ethics. There is a guy who, had he not become Batman and had the scars upon him that he did, who knows what he would have become. He could have become the Joker. The other one, and I've not really ever talked much about this, but when I was a kid, I loved Sherlock Holmes. And, Dr. Watson, and I remember when I was about 8 years old, I think I saw the old movie Hound of the Baskervilles with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson.
Those aren't British-sounding names at all.
And I just, because I grew up in a British family, and my mom was from England, and, my grandparents and we were the British family. We had tea at 4:00 every day. And we had tea and cakes and crumpets and Yorkshire pudding. But I digress.
We were the Irish family. We fought at 4:00.
We were a very, very British family. My mom still had bits of her accent, but my grandparents were British through and through. But anyway, Sherlock Holmes, when you really got into the stories of it, there was a guy who, when he was not solving crimes, he was a hot mess. He was raiding Dr. Watson's medicine bag and shooting up morphine. Oh yeah, Sherlock Holmes had quite the drug problem. When he was not solving crimes, he was getting into street fights, generally behaving pretty badly. I don't remember his landlady, I don't remember her name, but I do remember he lived at 221B Baker Street. And he had the upstairs apartment, and his landlady, he would drive her crazy when he was not solving crimes. He needed something to keep his mind and soul busy, and just being the most brilliant investigator of his time, but when he did not have that outlet, he was getting into all kinds of messed up behavior. I can still remember a scene from one of the movies, and they didn't touch a lot on that in the movies in the 40s and 50s. I remember one scene where he was, practicing pistol shooting and basically shooting up the walls of his apartment, and his landlady banging on the door telling him, stop shooting up my
Don't
my
be shooting
apartment.
that up, Mr. Holmes.
And but Sherlock Holmes, there's another guy, he was a hero, he was a brilliant guy, but when he didn't have his outlet, he fell apart. And so many heroes are like that. If you take someone like Hamlet, not to wax too Shakespearean for a while, but Hamlet has this vision of of the ghost of his father saying that he was murdered and to avenge me. And so we don't know if Hamlet is going nuts or if he's really seeing a ghost. There are some people within the story of Hamlet, they see him as just going off the rails. But whereas he himself, it's like he's avenging the murder of his father. His father is coming back from the afterlife talking about murder most foul. And they put poison in his ear. And to some people, Hamlet is a very complicated hero because we're not sure if Hamlet is actually losing his mind or he's just putting on an act to fake everybody else out.
And that really is incumbent on the actor portraying Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to be the actor, and giving the advice to the actors, or is he genuinely losing his mind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's so the hero is really a very complicated thing, I think, to play. As we said before, villains are fun. Mm-hmm. Villains can be so much fun as an actor to play. You've got all this subtext and, these double meanings and these half-truths and all of that stuff.
Flamboyance.
And the hero is very difficult to play because if you just play him as just this purely good person, that's really one-noted. And to play the hero, you've got to be aware of all this person's foibles and their weaknesses, and what is it exactly that happened to them to make them behave the way that they do. And it's something in a lot of storytelling, and the hero is just played as a very one-dimensional character. And if you're an actor and you find out what are the motivations of this character to be the way they are, not just what are they fighting for, but what are they fighting against, and how much of what they're fighting against is part of them. Because, as you know, when you have a person who is really, really, really against something or some philosophy or psychology or a system of politics or an ideology or anything like that, sometimes when they hate it so much, they can subconsciously see that as being part of them, and that's a part of themselves that they look at, and that's a part that they look in the mirror and they go, wow, I really don't like that about myself. Mm-hmm. If I can fix it outside of my life, then maybe if I fix it outside of myself, I'll be fixed inside at the same time.
I think that, that's interesting because I think a lot of people, particularly women, fall into that people pleaser category. Mm-hmm. It may not be superhero, but it's like, okay, what that I don't like about what I'm seeing about me in the mirror, what can I do? And I'm going to try to help this person and this person and this person. And then it takes the focus off of me not being satisfied with who I am. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a universal truth that a lot of people can relate to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you brought that up, how you really brought that home. That was cool.
One does what one can. But there's so many, to me, the really interesting heroes are the ones that have all the faults, all the chinks in the armor. It's like the Leonard Cohen line of it's, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's like the chinks in the armor. That's how the light gets in. Just as an aside story, one time I was at my job. This was years ago, and they had a blood drive one day, And the lady who was in charge of the shipping department, she was about maybe 5'1" and about as skinny as my little finger. And she gave blood that day. She also did not eat breakfast or lunch. She only had coffee.
Aww.
She gave blood. Lo and behold, everybody had gone out for lunch, and we worked in a pretty busy place, but everybody had gone out for lunch on this one day. It was myself and I think only about 3 other people stayed in the building, and the 3 of us were back in our break room eating lunch. And all of a sudden, outside, and the shipping department was right outside of the break room, and all of a sudden we heard bang, and we looked up and said, "What was that?" And so we go looking around, couldn't see anything, and I walked back in. I'm like, "No, this is not sitting well with me at all. Something's wrong here." And I found this lady who, with the giving of the blood and the not eating and the coffee crash and the whole thing, she basically passed out, hit her head on the corner of a filing cabinet, and gave herself a big cut. And it was, so when I found this lady, she was actually slumped down on the floor with her body halfway against the filing cabinet and just blood coming out on the side of her face. It was wonderful. It was just charming. And I, for whatever reason, said, and for whatever reason, it has always happened with me in my life. When something really bad goes down, all of a sudden I get very calm. And I was like, this is what we need to do. So I called the other, there was 3 ladies that we were eating lunch, and I called them out, and I was like, we need to call the ambulance. And one of them said, I forgot how to dial 911.
I've had that happen.
And
yeah.
So I basically,
I'm
saying, like, oh, okay, let's put something over here to stop the bleeding. Let's get the ambulance on the phone. And I'm on the phone with the 911 operator, and we're stopping her, and she's passed out cold. The ambulance guys couldn't totally find where we were at, so we're navigating them around and all this, and everything was fine. Basically, everything was fine. 2 things happened after that. We were working with these technicians who came in the next morning, and they heard the story about what had happened. They're going, "Max, you're a hero." And I'm going, "No, I'm not. I'm just treating it like if the situation were reversed. This is what I would hope other people would at least attempt to do for me." And they're like, no, dude, you say, I mean, she could have bled out. She could have done, all these terrible things could have happened. She could have lost a huge amount of blood, sepsis and infection and all this other stuff. And on the other hand, the company lawyer heard what had happened, and I get called into the office, and I get reprimanded for it's like,
yeah.
why did I do that? I needed to go find a member of management to do this. And I'm sitting there going, okay, the woman was bleeding profusely. Everybody in this place, there was only the 3 of us were here. There was no management to be seen, and they had this sort of like a locked partition between the back of the house, which is where we worked, in the front, and you didn't have the code to get in, so I'm gonna go running around banging on doors. It's like, no, I'm to have somebody else do it. It's like, no, I'm gonna dial 911. I'm gonna help this lady. I got reprimanded and I got written up for doing this, and I'm standing there going, you have got to be just bloody kidding me, but I guess the point of it is so much of having somebody be perceived as a hero is it's a matter of perception. It's a matter of what side of the story you're on. If you are against the hero, if you're on the side the hero's fighting against, that guy's not your hero. That guy's your villain. But if you're behind the guy, then yeah, that's your hero and the other side. So it really depends upon what side of the story the other characters are on as to how this central character is perceived. And again, I think, to really play a hero and really play it right and not have it done in a very bland sort of a way, and I would say this for any character, what are all their foibles? It's just like for a villain.
Mm-hmm.
What are their shortcomings? What hurt them?
What are their triggers?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just play hero as just the guy wearing the white hat coming in on the white horse and saving the day, and you don't include all the other stuff of what happened beforehand, and this is one of those games that we play, one of these acting exercises of 10 minutes before, and you're asking the actors, like, okay, so your character's coming into a scene doing this, what were they doing 10 minutes before, what were they doing 10 hours, 10 days, 10 weeks, etc., 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 before. you really, I think if you're playing a hero, you really have to ask yourself those questions of like, what are the steps leading up? What, how many times has this character either screwed up or done something that they've regretted that they're trying to make good for? What has hurt them? What do they believe in? What situation had gone out of control, that things went wrong for them and they're trying to refix it? It's like, if I can fix the situation, I can fix myself. And that doesn't usually work. That's why they have to keep trying and trying and trying and trying to be the good guy, just to play the good person. It's a very admirable thing to do. But if you're really trying to flesh out a character, and also if you're trying to understand another human being's humanity, be they fictional or realistic, what are their foibles? What are the chinks in their armor? What are their wounds? What are they trying to heal themselves from?
Yeah, again, you bring up a really good point. Now, two of the heroes I want to bring up who are complicated is Wanda, Max Scarlet Witch. So if you've watched any of the Marvel movies, I have not read the comic book, so I'll be honest with you, I'm taking what I've seen from the Marvel movies and then also WandaVision. But what I thought was really brilliant about what they did is, when you're talking trauma, she is in a wartime city, like a Bulgarian city. Her parents are killed. Then it's just her and her brother Pietro. He becomes Quicksilver because he can run really fast. She becomes Scarlet Witch. She is able to do different types of magic and things like that. I think one of the Marvel movies, Magneto ends up killing Pietro. And what is interesting is then when you go into WandaVision, each of the episodes are the different looks of grief. There's denial.
The 7 stages of grief.
Yeah, the 7 stages. So the first one, denial, she's there. She's lost her husband, and how does she really go with that? Or actually, Magneto is her husband. And how is she coping with that? And it's through these different sitcoms, because that's what she and her brother used to watch when they were little kids. So that's how she's coping. So at the point that she loses Magneto, she doesn't have her brother anymore. Again, we're looking at where she is with the grief and the 7 stages that she has of grief. So she has so much trauma. And then her children that she has with Magneto cease to exist. And I mean, there's just so much there, but eventually she becomes very powerful. But it's out of that trauma, it's out of that pain that she learns to be a really powerful superhero and is able to take all that and have that kind of empathy. All right, so then there's Clarice Starling from The Silence of the Lambs. So if you have not seen Silence of the Lambs, sorry, spoiler alert. She is considered probably one of the best female heroines in cinematic history. She comes to the FBI and she's just learning how to be an FBI agent. She is put by her boss, Jack Crawford, I believe is his name, and she's like, you need to go talk to this guy. We're trying to hunt down Buffalo Bill, which cracks me up because that supposedly is a relative of mine as a Cody. But yeah, he's this horrible serial killer. She sees Hannibal Lecter and he talks to her and she ends up telling him things about her life. What is interesting too, again, because Hannibal is very turned off by rudeness, his cellmate sees Clarice is rude to her, to say the least. And so then Hannibal we won't get into the specifics of it because there may be young ones within earshot, but it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Yeah. And so Hannibal has him off himself. What her backstory, what she tells him is that she had a pretty good upbringing up until the point that her father died. Her mom was able to support the kids with 2 jobs. Finally, after 2 years, couldn't do that. She ended up going to a farm in Montana. And that's when they had lambs on that farm and the lambs would get killed. And it was the sounds of the lambs being killed that really affected her. So she took her horse Hannah, tried to run away. They realized that she needed to get out of there, and then she went with Hannah to an orphanage, and that's where she had her childhood. Again, so you have someone who has all this pain, and she's told Hannibal this. And then she is able to go. He gives her clues. This guy may be in Ohio. She is actually able to figure out who Buffalo Bill is. She confronts him. They're in like the cellar. His latest victim is there, but they're still alive. And at this point it goes dark, but she has the courage. She hears where he is. She shoots him. And I think for a lot of people, that's what makes her so relatable. She had this terrible upbringing, but then managed to overcome that, become an FBI agent, and was able to find that. Now, during the point that Hannibal got transferred, he ended up escaping, but he did send her a note and asked her if she still hears the lambs. And then that's kind of where, and then she ends up finally being able to have a good night's sleep at a friend's apartment. Between Wanda and then Clarice, you have two people again. They're responding, as you said, to how trauma and pain. How do they do that? And it'd be very easy for Clarice to want to kill people out of anger and frustration. It'd be very easy for Wanda to take her magical powers and go to the other side. Now, there's any number of stories where she is going back and forth, but at the end of the day, she does decide to stay with being an Avenger, even though her feelings are very complicated because of the strength of her loss and the fact that anybody I get close to could die. You know, for me, I just think as far as like heroes go, that makes them really, really interesting. Now, one other hero I want to talk about, which is a real hero, and we were talking about this the other night when we were talking with our group, is Hedy Lamarr, who is a movie star from the 1930s. Actually, interestingly enough, she tested for Scarlett O'Hara with Gone with the Wind. Louis B. Mayer had seen her in London. One thing I didn't know was she had starred in this movie that was rather scandalous in 1933 that included some references to sex and how a woman's face would react to that. As a result of that, she had her other name, but then when Louis B. Mayer said, okay, we gotta forget that movie, you're changing it to Hedy Lamarr. So she did a number of movies and things like that, but one of the things, she was an inventor. And one of the things that she came up with was a frequency hopping signal. And the idea was that it could jam torpedoes to keep them from being tracked. And what was interesting was it was sort of adopted by the military in the 1960s, but that theory is what Bluetooth and GPS technology is now based on.
Really?
And this was a woman born in 1914. She died in the year 2000, but she is recognized as somebody that helped create that. And again, the woman was gorgeous. People just wanted to write her off as being a starlet, but she was, no, I'm going to go past this first career issue. There's probably any number of accounts that she was sexually harassed, because that's what happened to starlets back then. But the fact that she was able to come up with something like that, and it's something that we use now. And she was actually inducted 14 years after her death. She died again in the year 2000. Into the Inventors Hall of Fame. But so it is Hedy Lamarr that we can thank for GPS and your Bluetooth.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And also I just two things I wanted to mention also, just in reference to the subject. There was a big debate in the 80s when the movie Do the Right Thing came out.
Oh, interesting.
If Spike Lee, it's in my opinion the best movie he ever made. It's quite an epic thing, but it takes place on one street, and it just deals with all manner of racial tensions between black and white, and then within the black community itself, and it touches so many different situations, and still continue on today, unfortunately. But
chokehold, sadly.
But Spike Lee's character, Mookie, basically. Spike Lee considered that character to be the hero of the movie. And what happens is that this riot erupts on the street, and it's the middle of summer, and it's 100 and something degrees outside, and everybody's miserable. But there's the place, Sal's Pizzeria, and that's run by these white Italian Americans in a black neighborhood, and somehow or another they just get along. They don't agree on everything, but they get along. This argument starts, and it escalates into the whole entire neighborhood.
Well, you had someone die in a chokehold.
Yeah. It was this police brutality, and it turns into this huge riot on the street. What happens is Mookie, Spike Lee's character, takes a garbage can and throws it through the front window of Sal's Pizzeria. And that is when the whole thing just turns, and that's when you actually have the fire department who's putting out a fire. They get redirected to turn their fire hoses on the protesters and let the place burn. And when it got to the Con Festival, there was a big argument. There was between Spike Lee and Wim Wenders. And basically, the argument came down to, had Mookie not thrown that garbage can through that window, terrible as all that was, it wouldn't have turned into the destructive rage that it did. And there was a huge argument. And that's kind of the thing with heroes is like they got their flaws. They screw up. They're human beings. They make bad decisions. They just like every single one of us does.
That was an act of rage. To me, I think it adds to the poignance of the ending of the movie. If you have not seen it, I definitely recommend.
It's some parts of
it.
The ending can be kind of, even it came out in the 80s. I mean, it's still. I think we saw the movie rewatched it a few years ago. It's still
with our kids. Yeah.
The ending's very, very powerful. The other thing I wanted to mention also, I think it's a very interesting dynamic when you take a show like The X-Files, and particularly the chemistry between Agent Mulder and Agent Scully. He has family members being abducted by aliens. It's a long story, but he wound up losing his father over it. He's still trying to find his sister, who maybe was abducted by aliens, but maybe the government has something to do with it. He has all of that. And all this baggage, and he has this huge, wealth of knowledge about things like aliens and the paranormal and the occult and urban legends, all of that. He's brilliant as far as that goes. Then you have Agent Scully, who comes into this thing, and she is science, and she is hard fact. It's all very well and fine to sit here and believe in all this stuff, but if you don't have any kind of hard facts to back it up, she's not going to believe it. And the interaction of the two of them, I think if you put the two of them together and just create that one character, it's sort of like what goes on inside of the hero's head is like, I believe this, and I believe this, but I got to have some kind of facts to back it up. And which one do I listen to? Are they torn between just I have to follow my gut instincts, or do I have to get more facts? And that's kind of like this constant push-pull, tug-of-war that goes on within the hero. And I'll just say this, one of my favorite lines of television ever came at the end, where Agent Scully who had been raised Catholic, and she just felt like she, after being in the FBI and seeing all these things that had gone on, that she had lost her faith. She goes into a confessional, and she's talking to the priest, and she says, I work with a man who, if you talk to him about the existence of aliens and little green men, or chupacabras, or werewolves, or vampires, or any amount of other things, he has no difficulty whatsoever believing that. However, if you talk to him about the possibility of the existence of God, he'll be the first one to shut it down. She says, God is speaking to us all the time. We've just forgotten how to listen. And I just love that.
Especially from a character like Scully, who is science.
Yeah, everything is science.
Everything
and
is
medicine.
science and facts. But she goes into the confessional, and for Mulder wanting to believe, she does believe, but it's not in the same vein as him. So, and I think that's what makes their partnership so interesting, is that there is that clash.
One is yin and the other one is yang.
Yeah.
And you put the two of them together, and just to me, that's kind of what must go on inside the mind of a hero, just that push and pull, that the self-doubt, or the I've got an abundance of facts, or I've just got more rage and fire in the belly than I have actual evidence. And how does the hero navigate that? And there's a line from Deadpool to where he basically says, I'm not a hero. His boss at the time, or the guy who's trying to get him into the Avengers, says, a hero is a person who, at some point or other, this person just finds themselves in a situation and they have no other choice but to behave in the way they do, and then some people will call that heroism. But they're just a human being who is put in a situation, and they do what they do because deep down they know it's what they're supposed to do. There's no other choice. There's nothing in that moment, and that's what would happen. That's frankly what any of us would do, whether we are actual human beings or we are creations of a writer's imagination.
And when you're talking about writer's imagination, let's talk about what the creative prompt could be.
Okay.
If you were going to create a hero or a superhero, what sort of qualities would you want them to have? And what sort of doubts might they also have? And keep in mind, and you can do things that are heroic every day. For me, if I happen to be out on my nature trails and I see that somebody's dumped litter or a water bottle, I'll pick it up. And the other day I walked all the way back to the beginning of the trail, put it in my car so I could recycle it, and then went right back out. Now, that's not big bells and whistles, but those little things that you do, that can make a big difference. So, what sort of quirks maybe would that hero have? When we talking about Lecter, he hates people being rude. Is there something that is your hero's weakness chocolate? Something like that. That would be my weakness.
But you take someone like Mulder, he has an addiction to pornography.
Any number of things. So if you were going to be creating your own hero, again, if you're somebody who draws, if you're somebody who's like, what would my hero want to eat? Is it going to be a smoothie with spinach, or is it going to be an omelet with bacon? What is it that they do? And just, again, exploring things creatively that's a little off the beaten path, just to give you some ideas of things to work with and things that you can create, because every one of us has that spark to create. So whether you want to do, like last week we talked about the supervillain, superhero, you've got that. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you've found some things, and maybe you want to check out some of those movies, or just pull out some that you haven't watched for a while and went, yeah, now I'm inspired to be heroic.
We sincerely hope this is helpful. If you know of anyone who may find this information to be helpful, please pass it on. If you are able to support us on Patreon, please do. We do this because we really want to help people and give people some information and some kind of like a creative spark and some inspiration to go out and do something beautiful to make smart.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you guys so much, and we will be with you next time.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.